So, Australia's major banks have just ruled off FY24, and we're here to do some number crunching and give you a summary of those results. Cash earnings for the year were $30.7 billion, and that's a reduction of about 5.5% on the near record year in FY23 of $32.4 billion. Return on equity was 11.1%, a near enough 80 basis point reduction on the prior year. Now, despite this being a near record result, it also shows that competition and costs pulled back the rate hike record of the FY23 returns. So let's break those down. On competition first. Net interest margin fell by approximately 6 basis points year on year, though there was a small uptick in the second half. It really shows the fading of the rate hike benefit that has been achieved over the last 2 to 2.5 years. And to put that into context, margins at 1.81% are now around about 5 basis points higher than the low that we saw just before the rate hike cycle, and about 8 basis points or 9 basis points lower than the peak that was achieved in first half 23. Balance sheet growth didn't quite offset the reduction in margin. The majors' lending balances grew by about 3.5% for the year. And while that's a slower rate of growth on the prior year, there was also a stronger rate of growth in the second half of FY24. Positively, business lending continued to be a real driver of credit growth. So for the system, 7.5% growth in business lending. And for the majors, they actually increased market share in business lending, which helped to offset some of the declines in share for mortgage lending overall. The next big topic was costs. Operating expenses grew by over 6.5% for the year to a record $43.2 billion. And the cost-to-income ratio for the industry, or for the majors, was 48%, an increase of over 300 basis points year on year. That represents the highest cost-to-income ratio, excluding notables, for over 10 years for the major banks. And it's quite significant to really think about the tension that represents in terms of the investment requirement that the banks have for technology, for regulation, and for increasingly optimizing their businesses at the same time as trying to deliver short to medium term returns. And to put that into context, a target that people used to talk about a lot was a 40% cost to income ratio. Everything else held equal today, to hit 40%, the majors would need to reduce costs by near enough 17%, or just over $6 billion. Finally, on credit losses. Well, credit losses actually have continued to really support the results. So for this year, credit expense actually fell to $2.2 billion. And while all the majors did call out some spiking in arrears and single name exposures, it doesn't appear to be significant at this point, and it was really characterized as what we would expect given the point we are in the economic cycle. So, overall, a very good result, but one that certainly shows that the tailwind of rate hikes has faded quite rapidly, and it really confirms the outlook for the banking sector that is facing a number of significant tensions as we look to that. And so to oversimplify what those tensions are, really, banks here and around the world are getting squeezed at both ends, which is to say a much more competitive and concentrated banking market with a cost base that has not transformed structurally despite a lot of effort to optimize. And the tension that creates for banks around the world is that on the one hand, they have to focus on optimizing their current business models through simplification, through modernization of what they have. But at the same time, they need to contemplate how they're going to respond and possibly reinvent in response to these big trends that have stuck. Technology, changes in customer preferences, regulation, and the switching of value pools within banking. What we expect that will mean is that banks are going to become much more clear on the choices that they are making, on where they participate and where they have advantage. And in turn, becoming very clear on the winning capabilities that they are going to need to deliver on those propositions and transforming towards those capabilities. And that may also require some changes in mindsets. Because for the last 10 years, global banking and in Australia has been focused on the simplification, the creation of stability and safety within our banking system. And we should all be very thankful for that, given what it has provided for us as a country. But reinvention might require new bets on things that perhaps feel a little less familiar and a little less safe. Topics such as diversification, personalization, the use of partnerships and ecosystems, and really getting after the structural side of the cost base. The good news for Australia is you wouldn't want to be in any other banking market in the world to get that done, because the strength and performance of our major banks is like a coiled spring when you think about the ambition that I've described.